Let me tell you a story. It starts with a woman in a green dress, stuck on the side of the highway, and it ends with a man in a suit getting pulled out of the mud by her. Sounds like karma, right? But it's more than that. It's about what we choose to do when no one's watching, and who ends up holding the winch when the roles reverse. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from, and if you're the kind of person who believes in second chances, or just enjoys a little poetic justice, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Alright, let's get into it. The radiator let out one last hiss before the car gave up. Amelia Vance stood by her stalled sedan in heels and a silk dress, cars flying past like she didn't exist. She could have called her own towing company. She owns it after all, but part of her wanted to wait, just to see if someone would actually stop for a stranger. Spoiler, one did, and then he didn't. Her thumb hovered over the contact for her own company, Vance Recovery. The irony was almost comical. Here she was, the owner of the most reliable towing and recovery service in the state, stranded like any other motorist. She could make the call, and one of her guys, probably Frank or young Leo, would be there within 20 minutes. But a stubborn part of her resisted. Felt like admitting defeat. For a few minutes, she wanted to see if the world still contained the kind of person who would stop for a stranger. She leaned against the hot metal of her car, maintaining a posture of calm that betrayed the frantic thumping in her chest. The world, it seemed, was in a hurry. A stream of vehicles, minivans filled with families, battered pickup trucks, sleek sports cars, flowed past, a river of indifference. Drivers' faces were fleeting blurs, some staring straight ahead, some glancing at her with mild curiosity before their attention was reclaimed by the road. No one slowed. No one stopped. It was an old and weary lesson, but one that always stung a little. Amelia's internal debate was about to conclude in favor of calling her own service when she saw it. A gleaming black SUV, a monument of German engineering, was approaching in the far left lane. It was the kind of vehicle that didn't so much drive as it did preside over the road. Its tinted windows reflected the sun with an obsidian glare. As it drew closer, it began to drift right, slowing its imperious advance. A flicker of hope, small and fragile, ignited within her. Maybe this was it. The SUV pulled onto the shoulder about 50 feet ahead of her. The passenger window lowered with a quiet electric hum. Amelia could see the driver now, a man in a crisp, expensive-looking suit, his silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed. He was on his phone, the device pressed to his ear, his expression one of pure, undiluted annoyance. He looked at her, his eyes scanning her from her impractical heels to her worried face, then to her disabled car. There was no empathy in his gaze, only assessment. He was calculating the time and effort it would take to help, and he had clearly found the cost to be too high. He lifted a hand, not in a wave of greeting or concern, but in a gesture of curt dismissal. A flick of the wrist that said, "Not my problem." Then, without another glance, the window slid up, and the luxury SUV accelerated smoothly back into the flow of traffic, disappearing into the heat haze down the highway. The hope inside Amelia didn't just flicker out. It was snuffed out with a cold puff of contempt. She stared at the empty space where the SUV had been, the insult hanging in the air like exhaust fumes. It wasn't just the refusal to help. It was the casual disdain, the assumption that she and her problem were nothing more than a momentary, unpleasant obstruction on his very important journey. A bitter smile touched her lips. "Okay, world," she murmured to herself, pulling out her phone. Message received. She finally pressed the contact for Vance Recovery. "Leo, it's Amy," she said when the young dispatcher answered. "Yeah, I'm on I-84, eastbound, about mile marker 72. The old sedan finally gave up the ghost. Can you send someone out?" Leo's voice was full of youthful concern. "Of course, Amy. You okay? Frank just finished a call downtown. He can be there in 15." I'm fine, Leo. Just a little overdressed for a breakdown. She managed a small laugh. Tell Frank to look for the woman in the ridiculous green dress. He can't miss me. As she ended the call, she leaned back against her car, the brief, ugly encounter with the CEO. He had to be a CEO or some other captain of industry, settling into a cold, hard knot in her stomach. It was the kind of moment that reinforced why she had left the polished, backstabbing world of corporate public relations years ago. She had traded a six-figure salary and a corner office for grease-stained hands and the honest, tangible work of helping people out of jams. People like herself. And people, she mused grimly, like him. What happened next was a study in cosmic timing, a sequence of events so perfectly calibrated it felt less like coincidence and more like a carefully penned act of fate. 15 minutes later, as promised, the familiar sight of a Vance recovery flatbed truck appeared in her rearview mirror. It was Frank, a burly man with a kind face and a beard that seemed to contain its own weather system. He pulled up behind her, the truck's amber lights flashing, creating a safe zone around her disabled vehicle. "Boss," Frank called out, hopping down from the cab. "Fancy meeting you here. Headed to the gala?" "Not anymore, Frank," Amelia said, a genuine smile finally reaching her face. "The car had other plans. Thanks for coming so quick. Anytime. Let's get this thing loaded up." Frank was all business, efficient, and professional. As he began setting up the winch, Amelia's phone buzzed. It was Leo again. "Amy, you are not going to believe this," he said, his voice crackling with excitement. "We just got another call. Pile up about 2 miles ahead of you, same direction. Some big shot in a fancy SUV apparently wasn't paying attention, hit a patch of oil from a previous wreck, and spun out into the median. Cops are on scene, but they need a heavy-duty recovery to pull him out without tearing up the vehicle. Said it's a real mess." Amelia felt a strange premonition, a cold tingle that had nothing to do with the setting sun. "A fancy SUV, you said? Black?" "Yeah, a big one. A Nero X-Class, top of the line." "Why?" Amelia's eyes narrowed. A Nero X-Class. The vehicle of choice for the self-important and wealthy. "No reason. Who's closest to handle it?" "Well, that's the thing," Leo said, a touch of hesitation in his voice. "You are. Frank's got the flatbed for your car, but the big rig, the rotator, is at the South Depot. I can dispatch it, but it'll be a 40-minute trip in this traffic. You, on the other hand, you're just 2 miles away. Frank's truck has a secondary winch strong enough for a simple pull-out if the car's not too badly wedged." The pieces clicked into place with an audible snap in her mind. Couldn't be. Could it? "Frank," Amelia called out, her voice sharp and focused. "Change of plans. Load my car, but we're not heading back to the yard just yet. We've got another call, just up the road." Frank paused, wiping his hands on a rag. "What kind of call?" "A roadside assistance," she said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "For a black Nero X-Class SUV stuck in the median." Frank's eyebrows shot up. He had seen the SUV speed past her earlier. He'd been far enough back to witness the whole dismissive exchange. A low whistle escaped his lips. "Well, I'll be," he rumbled, a grin matching her own. "Let's go, boss." The drive was short. As they crested a small hill, they saw the scene. Police cruisers, their blue and red lights painting the twilight sky, had cordoned off 2 lanes. And there, nestled ignominiously in the muddy grass of the center median, was the black SUV. It was tilted at an awkward angle, its front wheels sunk deep into the soft earth. Its driver was standing beside it, phone pressed to his ear once again, his posture no longer arrogant, but rigid with barely controlled fury. It was him, the man who had waved her off. Amelia had Frank pull the tow truck onto the shoulder, just behind the last police cruiser. She stayed in the passenger seat for a moment, observing. The man, Marcus Thorne, as she would soon learn his name was, was pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly as he spoke. He was berating someone on the other end of the line, his voice a low, angry bark that was audible even from a distance. He was a man accustomed to control, and he had completely lost it. She took a deep breath. She had kicked off her heels and was now barefoot. In the back of the truck's cab, she always kept a spare set of work clothes. In a matter of moments, the emerald dress was gone, replaced by a pair of rugged, oil-stained overalls and a navy blue jacket with Vance Recovery, stitched in bold yellow letters over the breast pocket. She slipped her feet into a pair of steel-toed work boots, lacing them up with firm, practiced tugs. The transformation was complete. She was no longer a stranded motorist in a party dress. She was the professional in charge. She grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight and a clipboard from the dash and swung herself down from the cab. The cold air felt good. The ground felt solid and real beneath her boots. Frank gave her a nod of encouragement. "Showtime," he muttered. Amelia strode towards the scene, her walk confident and purposeful. The clack of her former heels on asphalt was replaced by the solid crunch of her boots on gravel. A state trooper, a young woman with a weary expression, saw her approaching and raised a hand to stop her. "Ma'am, this area is closed. We're waiting on a heavy-duty tow." "I'm the tow," Amelia stated calmly, holding up her jacket logo. "Amelia Vance. Vance Recovery. My dispatcher said you called." The trooper's eyes widened slightly in surprise, her gaze flickering over Amelia's composed face. "Oh, right. Good. This guy is a real piece of work," she said in a hushed tone. "Name's Marcus Thorne, CEO of Thorne Industries. Thinks his phone call is more important than listening to us." Amelia's smile was thin. "I can imagine." She walked past the trooper and approached the fuming CEO. Marcus Thorne didn't even notice her at first. He was too busy laying into his assistant. "I don't care what you have to do. Just get me a car and find out who is in charge of this godforsaken highway. I have a merger dinner in 2 hours. This is a public relations disaster. PR disaster." The phrase echoed in Amelia's mind, a ghost from her past career. She knew exactly what it meant. A powerful CEO, a reckless accident, the potential for a story about distracted driving and executive arrogance. She understood the stakes better than he could possibly imagine. She stopped a few feet from him and waited. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, clipboard in hand, letting her presence register. Finally, sensing he was being watched, Marcus ended his call with an angry snap and whirled around. "Are you the tow truck driver?" he demanded, his eyes not yet focusing on her face, but on the uniform. "What took you so long? I need this car out of here now. I expect absolute discretion. No pictures, no talking to anyone. Do you understand? I'll pay double your usual rate for silence and speed." His words were clipped, arrogant, accustomed to buying compliance. He still hadn't truly looked at her. He saw a uniform, a function, a solution to his problem that he could purchase. Amelia let the silence stretch for a beat. She clicked her pen. "I'll need you to sign a liability waiver before we attach the winch, Mr. Thorne." At the sound of her voice, calm, female and vaguely familiar, his head snapped up. His eyes, clouded with impatience, finally focused on her face. And then he saw her. Not just the uniform, but the woman wearing it. He saw the face of the stranded motorist he had so breezily dismissed less than an hour ago. The change in his expression was magnificent. It was a rapid, cascading sequence of emotions. First, confusion, as his brain struggled to reconcile the woman in the fancy dress with the professional in the work boots. Then, a flicker of disbelief, followed by the slow, dawning horror of realization. The color drained from his face, leaving his expensive tan looking sallow under the flashing police lights. His jaw, which had been set in a line of imperious command, went slack. "You," he breathed, the word a choked whisper. Amelia offered him a small, professional smile. It held no warmth, only the cool, polished steel of vindication. "Me," she confirmed. "Amelia Vance, owner of Vance Recovery. It looks like you're having some car trouble. Funny how that happens." The power dynamic on that stretch of highway shifted so profoundly it was almost a physical force. Marcus Thorne, CEO, master of his universe, was suddenly powerless. He stood there, ankle-deep in mud, his multi-million-dollar merger dinner evaporating before his eyes. And the only person who could help him was the woman he had treated like a piece of roadside trash. She held the winch cable that could pull his car out. She held the pen for the waiver he needed to sign. But more than that, she held the keys to his entire PR crisis. He stared at her, speechless. The angry, commanding executive was gone, replaced by a man suddenly aware of his own monumental foolishness. The bystander effect, the casual cruelty of his dismissal. It was all coming back to him, framed now not as a forgotten moment, but as the prologue to his current humiliation. I don't understand," he stammered, gesturing feebly between her and the truck. "It's not complicated, Mr. Thorne," Amelia said, her voice even. "My car broke down. You drove by. Now your car has broken down. And I'm the one with the tow truck. What happens next is largely up to you." Frank, watching from a distance, leaned against his truck with his arms crossed, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. The state trooper was trying, and failing, to hide a grin. This was better than any drama on television. Marcus swallowed hard, the reality of his predicament crashing down on him. He wasn't just dealing with a tow truck driver. He was dealing with the physical embodiment of his own karma. He could see the potential headlines flashing in his mind. CEO strands woman, needs her help minutes later. It was a story that wrote itself, a viral tale of hubris and comeuppance. And she knew it. He could see it in her calm, intelligent eyes. "Look," he began, his tone completely transformed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading edge. I am so sorry. About before. I was distracted. I was on a call. I wasn't thinking. You saw me." Amelia cut him off, her voice not accusatory, but factual. "You saw I was in trouble and you made a choice." She let that statement hang in the air. She wasn't here to lecture him. She was just laying out the facts. Yes, I did," he admitted, his gaze dropping to the muddy ground. It was inexcusable, a terrible lapse in judgment. Amelia tapped the clipboard. "Everyone has lapses in judgment. The question is what you do after. Now about your vehicle. My standard rate for a non-standard recovery like this, especially one involving a police presence and lane closures, is $500. But you mentioned double." She paused, letting him absorb the transactional nature of his own earlier offer. $1,000, payable now, and that's just for the tow. The discretion you mentioned, that's a different conversation. He looked up, a flicker of his old self returning. "Are you extorting me?" Amelia raised an eyebrow. "Extorting? Mr. Thorne, I'm negotiating. It's a concept I'm sure you're familiar with. You set the terms when you offered to pay for silence. I'm simply clarifying the price. My colleague and I have a gala to get to. Or well, we did." She gestured vaguely back down the road toward her own stranded car. The shame on his face was a visible thing. He had not just been unkind. He had been a hypocrite. He, who was in a rush to a fancy dinner, had callously disregarded someone else in the exact same predicament. He pulled out a wallet made from leather that probably cost more than her first car. He fumbled with the bills, his hands shaking slightly. He counted out 10 $100 bills and held them out to her. Amelia didn't take them. She nodded toward Frank. "Give it to my driver. He'll write you a receipt." This small act was another assertion of her position. She was the boss. He was the client. As Frank efficiently hooked the winch to the SUV's undercarriage, Amelia turned back to Marcus. "Now, about the public relations side of things," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential tone, the voice of her past life. "That trooper over there? Her body cam has been running this whole time. There are at least 3 cars that drove by filming you on their phones. By morning, Marcus Thorne's bad day will be trending. Unless you get ahead of it." He stared at her, baffled. "Get ahead of it? How?" "You don't try to hide it," she said, sounding exactly like the PR strategist she used to be. "You own it. You issue a statement tonight. You talk about the frantic pace of modern life. You mention how you failed to stop for a stranded motorist, only to need help yourself minutes later. You call it a humbling, teachable moment. You announce a donation to a highway safety program. You turn yourself from the villain of the story into the man who learned a valuable lesson. You make it about redemption, not arrogance." Marcus Thorne was utterly stunned. He was being given million-dollar crisis management advice by a tow truck driver on the side of a highway, the very woman he had wronged. Her analysis was instant, sharp, and absolutely correct. It was the exact move his own expensive PR firm would have taken 2 days and $50,000 to come up with. Why would you help me?" he asked, his voice raw with confusion. Amelia looked at him, her expression softening for the first time. "Because my business isn't about punishing people, Mr. Thorne. It's about getting them out of trouble. All kinds of trouble. I believe in second chances. I just think people should have to work for them." With a powerful groan, the winch engaged, and the luxury SUV was steadily pulled from its muddy prison back onto the solid ground of the shoulder. It was free, but its owner was not. He was still caught in the web of his own making. What happened next wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and profound. Marcus Thorne stood there as Frank unhooked his vehicle. He watched as Amelia did a final check, making sure no damage had been done. He saw the professionalism, the competence, the quiet dignity of a person who took pride in her work. He walked over to her as she was about to leave. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice quiet. "Amelia, thank you for everything, the tow, and the advice." "Just do your part, Mr. Thorne," she replied. "The next time you see someone on the side of the road, remember what it feels like." She and Frank got back in their truck and drove away, leaving Marcus Thorne standing by his now recovered but still dirt-caked SUV. He did not get on his phone. He simply stood there in the flashing lights, watching them go, a man profoundly and permanently changed. Amelia didn't make it to the gala. Instead, she and Frank went to an all-night diner, where she, still in her work clothes, treated him to the best steak on the menu with a fraction of Marcus Thorne's $1,000. The next morning, the story did hit the news, but it was not the one Marcus had feared. It was the one Amelia had designed. Thorne Industries released a statement. Marcus Thorne publicly apologized for his moment of thoughtlessness and announced a substantial 5-year partnership with a National Motorist Assistance Fund. He called the experience a necessary and humbling wake-up call. He became, for a brief news cycle, a symbol of executive accountability. A week later, a thick envelope arrived at the office of Vance Recovery. Inside was a personal check from Marcus Thorne made out to Amelia for a sum that made her eyebrows shoot up. Tucked in with it was a handwritten note. "Dear Ms. Vance," it read, "this is not for the tow, nor for the advice. It's a finder's fee. You helped me find a piece of my humanity I thought I had lost. Thank you." Amelia looked at the check, then out the window at her fleet of trucks, gleaming in the sun. Her work was about more than just metal and machinery. It was about people. It was about showing up when things went wrong. It's a powerful lesson to remember. The person you pass by on the road of life may seem insignificant, a footnote in your day, but you never truly know who they are. You don't know their story, their strength, or the role they might play in your own. True power isn't in the car you drive or the title on your business card. It's in your character, in the kindness you show when you think no one is watching. Because sometimes the person you dismiss is the only one holding the keys to pull you from the wreckage.